Hello everyone, welcome to another video. So in 2024 I appeared in a few DevOps interviews, and some of you might already know that I was able to switch my job recently. It's been like 1.5 months of as I'm recording this video, so it's only been 1.5 months that I've joined this new company, and I got close to 50% salary hike as well. And I have already uploaded one video on how I was able to achieve that, and the link of that video will be in the description of this video, so you can go watch that. So whatever interviews I faced in 2024 and whatever questions were asked to me, so I've just prepared this DevOps roadmap that you all can follow if you want to start your DevOps journey. This is going to be the best DevOps roadmaps that you can follow, especially if you are a fresher, or if you are from another field and you want to switch to DevOps. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing, as you can see on my screen, is operating system Linux. So you cannot do away with Linux. That means if you want to be a DevOps engineer, you need to be a Linux administrator as well. Okay, and you have to start with Linux always, because everything in DevOps starts with Linux. The containers run on Linux. In big enterprises, the container orchestration engine Kubernetes, it runs on Linux. It is based on Linux, you can say. And yeah, so in DevOps, Linux is the base of everything. You cannot ignore that at all. Okay, and it was, and it will be the most important tool, or the most important knowledge that you can have. All right. Then popular infrastructure as code tools like Terraform, they also run on Linux. Then any configuration management tool of the modern world like Ansible, it uses Linux. Then most of the highly popular monitoring tools, you can run them on Windows machines or on some other OSs as well, but in big enterprises you will see they will be installed and configured on Linux. Okay, so and also I have faced a lot of interviews where the interviewer is asking me questions on Linux. Okay, so in a DevOps interview you will be asked questions on Linux, so you have to be prepared for that. And what all things you have to learn in Linux, if you want to know that, I have already prepared one video uploaded to my channel. The link of that video also will be in the description of this video, so please go and watch that, what all you need to prepare in Linux if you want to become a DevOps engineer. Okay, next, networking, storage and security. So as Linux is important, the basics of networking, storage and security is also important. Okay, so once again I have already created two videos, one on networking basics, other one on cloud storage basics, so you can go watch that. It's going to give you enough knowledge to get started with these two things. Okay, so in networking, if I talk about, I'm talking about you should know what is an IP address, what are protocols, what is DNS or domain name system, then firewall, LAN, WAN, router, switch, OSI model. I have one video dedicatedly on OSI model. You can go and watch that as well. I'll put the link of that video also in the description of this video. Then you should know what are ports. Okay, so some standard ports like a TCP port, UDP, SMTP, what is SSH. All right, then you should know what are subnets, what are the different gateways, what is route table, what are interfaces, and what is netting. Okay, network address translation, and there are some other terms as well, but as I mentioned, there's one video that I've already created, so you can go watch that. It's going to give you enough knowledge to get started with networking. Similarly, for storage, the basics of Linux storage are really important. You should know what is an LVM or logical volume manager. Then you should know what is RAID in general. Then what are different file systems, what is NAS, SAN, partitions. Okay, then what are block devices. In terms of cloud storage, you should know what is an elastic block store, what is S3 bucket, uh, what is block level storage, what is file level storage, etc. So as I mentioned, I have a dedicated video on cloud storage basics. Okay, so that video you can go and watch that. It's going to start everything from scratch, so it's going to give you enough knowledge in regards to cloud storage basics. Then in terms of security, you should know what is a firewall, what is HTTPS. Okay, then what is SSL, especially I mean SSL certificates. Then you should know the basics of cloud security. Okay, so whatever cloud platform you want to learn. In my case, it is AWS, so you can look for the cloud security basics of AWS. Then you should know what is encryption, etc. So these are some of the basics, because as a DevOps engineer, you will be dealing with applications, but not just applications. You will be managing those applications. So you'll be managing their networking, their storage, their security, and everything. Okay, so you need to know the basics of it. All right, let's move on to the next slide. The next is cloud platform. So you can start with the core services. So here I'm talking about AWS because I'm from AWS's background. So I'm talking about the core services here of AWS, but you can choose any of the cloud platforms of your choice. I've given 4 options here: AWS, Azure, GCP, OpenStack. AWS, Azure, and GCP are widely used, but some companies use OpenStack as well. So you can start with any of those, but I would highly recommend that you start with either AWS or Azure. Okay, so in AWS, I mean the core services, which is IAM, EC2, S3, VPC, ELB, and so on, as you can see on the list. Okay, so all these services are important for you to get started with any cloud platform. All right. Then next thing I want to talk about a very important concept here, that how do you deploy your DevOps infrastructure. Okay, so there are in general 2 ways. Okay, managed services versus open source. So generally, when you're getting started with DevOps, you can start with using some open source tools, which is not going to cost you much. So how you can use those tools is what I have mentioned here. So once again, I'm talking in respect to AWS here. So if you want to get started with deploying your DevOps infrastructure, so it can be for a company as well, because when the company moves to DevOps practices, they're not sure if that is the right thing for them to do. So they don't want to spend too much initially, and they want to start with 1 or 2 main applications that they want to test the DevOps practices with. So in that case, what they can do, they can simply create the on-demand EC2 instances in AWS, and they can install open source applications. Okay, open source applications means the application's source code is available to public, and you can contribute to it as well. Okay, so that's called open source applications. It does not mean that it is free of cost, because each open source tool will have its own enterprise level edition as well, which is paid always. But you can use their community editions, which are free for use. And to do some testing, you can always use the community versions of these open source tools. So if I take an example here, you can create EC2 instances or virtual machines in AWS, in your AWS account, and you can install open source applications like GitLab, or it can be a Kubernetes cluster, which is created using kubeadm tool, or it can be a local containerd or Docker installation to run some local Docker containers on that machine, on that EC2 instance. It can be Docker Compose if you have a multi microservice based application that you want to run. So you can use Docker Compose, or you can install your database as well. You can use MySQL free, the free and open source edition. So you can install directly on EC2 instances. So some small companies which are just starting and they have limited budget, they can start with this type of deployment as well. Okay, so the benefit of this is it's going to cost them a lot less. Okay, it's going to be very cheap for them. But of course, since they are doing everything on their own, they're not using the vendor managed services, their administrative overhead is going to be a lot. So they would need extra people to manage their infrastructure, and there will be more failures, and there will be more failures, and you will have a lot of downtime as well. But if you can manage it, it's up to you. So it depends from one company to the other, okay, how they want to do it. But if they have less budget, they can always start with this approach. Or if you have good budget, or if you have if you are in the DevOps world already and you have already deployed a few applications, okay. So once again, it depends. I'm not saying that a new company cannot start with the managed services. Sometimes it is easier to use managed services if you have the budget. If the budget allows, then you can go for managed services, because herein the vendor is going to manage most of the things for you. You are only going to focus on your application part. The infrastructure part is going to be taken care by the vendor. But it depends, because it's going to increase your budget as well. So if you have the budget, then start with managed services. So what happens that you can use vendor managed services. Here I've given example of some AWS services like ECS, that is Elastic Container Service, that is used to create Docker containers in AWS. Docker or containerd containers, it can be anything. So you can use ECS, or you can use their fully managed Kubernetes, their Kubernetes clusters, which are created in EKS service, Elastic Kubernetes Service, or they have their fully managed this database service as well, which is called RDS, or Relational Database Services. Or similarly, you can use their Elastic Cache service as well. So it depends on the budget. If you have the budget, please go ahead and use the managed services. It's going to save a lot of administrative overhead. You don't need too many people to manage your infrastructure, but it's going to cost a lot to you. All right. So these are the two approaches that one can follow. So it depends on that. And also, if you want to install, or if you want to set up your own DevOps infrastructure, a small scale DevOps infrastructure, you can go for the first option. So you can create your EC2 instances, install open source tools to learn them. Okay, so this is the best approach actually, I would say. If you want to learn DevOps, then go for this approach first, and then go for the managed services. So in this way, you are going to learn a lot. All right. Then if I talk about in terms of containers, of course, you need to learn the basics of these containers. So the basic concepts of containers, how it differs from a virtual machine, you should really know. Why to use these containers in the first place, and why not something else? You should know the difference between that. Okay, so you should know that. Then you should know what are Docker volumes. You should know how networking works in Docker world or in container world. I'm using Docker here, but Docker has been deprecated from a lot of platforms, but it is still popular, and all the concepts that you learn are still valid for any other container platform. So that's why I'm using Docker, but I generally mean I'm talking about containers. So apart from Docker, there's another platform called containerd. So you can learn any one of that, but since I'm from a Docker background, so I'm talking, I'm using Docker a lot, but it generally means I'm talking about containers. Anyways, so you should know the networking part of Docker containers. You should know how to write a Docker file, which is used to build your Docker image. This is pretty important from interview point of view. Also, these are the things that are asked a lot. Okay, you should know how to write a Docker file, what are the different instructions within it, the most common instructions, or how to write an how to optimize your Docker image for space, because so there are multiple ways to write a Docker file. You should know the best way or the most efficient way to write a Docker file. Okay, then what are Docker images, then what are the benefits of containers, how it relates to DevOps, how it works in a DevOps world. You should know that. Then what are the roles, what are its role in CI/CD pipelines. CI stands for continuous integration, CD stands for continuous deployment. So first thing is you should know what is CI/CD and how a Docker or containers are used in CI/CD pipelines. Then also you can start with, you can learn some services, the vendor managed services in AWS, like ECS in AWS. So that is a container service available in AWS. Then you should know when to use containers and when not to use as well. Okay, then you should know the use cases, and do some projects on containers, and deploy some container applications, see how it works. If it's failing, try to fix it. So you have to do a lot of troubleshooting, how to check logs. You should know all this stuff, to get started with Docker containers or containerd containers. Then next is Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is the container orchestration platform, which means that if you have hundreds and thousands of different containers that you want to manage efficiently, effectively, you have to use one container orchestration platform, and Kubernetes is the most widely used container orchestration platform. This is like the heart of DevOps, you can say. If you know Kubernetes inside out, you can crack any DevOps interview. Okay, so it is that important. So you should know its architecture, what are its different components, then what are the use cases where you want to use it, how it differs from another platform called Docker Swarm, or simply Swarm, which is also like a competition to Kubernetes, but of course Kubernetes is way ahead. But in some cases you will need to use Swarm and not Kubernetes. So you should know the difference between these two. Okay, when to use what. Okay, then when not to use it, of course you should know. Then of course you can start with managed vendor services. I'm talking about AWS here, so you can start with EKS. In Azure you have AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service as well, and in other platforms, I think in Google Cloud you have GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, that you can use. So you can utilize those services. Okay, so in today's world, I would say in AWS, EKS is widely used in a lot of companies. Okay, so if you are planning to learn AWS cloud, then you should know what is Amazon EKS, how it works, how it is deployed, how it is used to deploy your pod applications. Okay, so it is one of the most important services for a DevOps engineer. Then use cases and different projects, deploying different applications using Kubernetes. Then you should know how to troubleshoot the known errors. So there's a list of known errors in Kubernetes that you should know step by step how to troubleshoot those. Often those are asked in the interview as well. Okay, then you should know how to check logs. Then there are different CLI tools like kubectl, EKSCTL, and kops. You should know the difference between these tools. Okay, and kubectl is one of the most important tools in the Kubernetes world. Then EKSCTL is also used to create EKS clusters in AWS. Then kops is also like a legacy tool now, but it was used to create Kubernetes clusters in AWS. Okay, but I think it is slightly getting outdated now. But even then, it depends from one organization to the other. Some organizations might still be using it. All right. Then if I talk about CI/CD pipelines, you should know the DevOps fundamentals first. What are the fundamentals of DevOps? What are CI/CD pipelines, and why to use DevOps for your applications? So once again, I have already created some videos on these things, on DevOps fundamentals, what are CI/CD pipelines, then why to use DevOps. I'm going to put the URL or the link of those videos in the description of this video. Please go and watch that. It's going to clear all your doubts about DevOps, and it's going to give you the right information to start your DevOps journey. Okay. Then what are the hot tools for CI/CD pipelines? So these are the two tools that I'm seeing a lot. Even in my current organization, we are using uh, ArgoCD here. But apart from that, this GitHub Actions is also really getting popular because of its ease of deployment. It's very easy to configure and use, so it is getting really popular. So it depends on your interest. If you want to learn GitHub Actions or ArgoCD, so learn just one tool. Okay, you don't need to learn both the tools at a time. Just learn one tool in deep. Okay, so yeah. And some of the legacy tools, if I talk about Jenkins, I mean, it's still very popular in some of the companies. Okay, and it is often asked in interviews as well these days as well, but it is slightly getting outdated now with with its own complexities and how good it is to deploy applications, or what are the different features available. So it is slightly getting outdated now with tools like GitHub Actions and ArgoCD taking over. So I think in some time it might not be that popular, in my opinion. But anyways, it is still asked in a lot of interviews. It is still mentioned in most of the job descriptions of DevOps engineer. So yeah, it's still very important, but going forward it might not be. Then apart from these tools, you can also use AWS Code Pipeline. Some of the organizations are using it, and Azure DevOps as well. Okay, so try to learn any one tool out of these five. Okay, so you don't need to learn all the five tools, just learn one tool in deep. So that is more than sufficient for you to get a job. All right. Then next is monitoring and logging. So whatever applications, whatever infrastructure you have deployed, you have to continually monitor it. Okay, have a logging mechanism or a logging storage platform that you can use to troubleshoot issues and fix them. Okay, so it's a continuous process. So there are again very popular tools like Datadog. Then you have Kibana, Splunk, then Nagios. Then you have some log aggregation tools like Sumo Logic and Grafana Loki. Okay, but in my opinion, you should start with Prometheus, which is going to collect your application metrics, and use Grafana to visualize those metrics in different dashboards on Grafana. So you can start with Prometheus and Grafana. Then after you have completed that, you can go for one more this log aggregation tool like Grafana Loki. Okay, so these three tools are the tools that I would recommend right now for you to learn in terms of monitoring and logging for your DevOps infrastructure. Next, if I talk about infrastructure as code, so as you know that whatever infrastructure we are deploying right now, we use an automation tool to do that. And the most common or the most famous tool right now is Terraform, which is being used by most of the organizations in today's world. So start with Terraform as of now, I would say. Don't learn on all the tools you see on the screen, but if you can learn Terraform, so that is more than sufficient. Once again, learn Terraform, but in deep. Then there's one more tool called Crossplane, which is really getting popular now. In few years time, we may see Crossplane being equally competitive to Terraform, but right now it is Terraform, but Crossplane is really getting popular. But I would still say at the time of recording this video, I would say start with Terraform as IaC. Okay, IaC tool. Next, then configuration management. So whatever servers you have sometimes you have to manage those servers. You have to patch them for security updates, for bugs, okay, from time to time. So or you have to install some new software packages on them. So you need a configuration management tool as well. So for that, the most common or the most famous one is Ansible, still is. But there are some other tools as well. So you can use AWS System Manager as well to manage your servers. You can use other tools like Puppet, Chef, or SaltStack. It's up to you. So once again, you have to learn just one tool, but try to learn in deep. Okay. So this is about configuration management tools. Then if I talk about your source code management, where you store your application source code, your Kubernetes YAML manifest files, or if you're using Helm charts, so you have those different YAML files for your Helm charts. So your source code management is done via Git. So Git is the tool that you need to learn. So you have to learn the basics of Git. You need to know the basic Git commands. And for source code management, for storing your repositories, your codes into repositories, you can use GitLab, which is the one of the most popular tools right now. Okay, so you can start with the open source GitLab tool, and enterprises are using the paid version of GitLab. Apart from that, you can also start with GitHub, of course. Okay, so these are the two tools. Out of these two, you have to learn just one tool, but you have to learn the Git basics as well. Okay, so Git is a tool that is used to manage these source code management tools. Okay, so you have to learn the basic Git commands, the basic Git concepts, and apart from these two tools, learn one tool. All right. Then if I talk about programming language or scripting, so so it is actually debatable right now that a DevOps engineer should learn programming or not. Okay, if you can, I would say please go ahead and learn it. Okay, but not in all organizations you will have a DevOps engineer who is working as a developer as well. So in some of the companies you will see a different developer team and a different DevOps team. In that case, you don't need to do any programming. But in some companies, we have a developer who is doing DevOps work as well. So there you need to have, you need to have some exposure to programming language as well. So it depends on that. So I would say if you can learn, please go ahead and learn one of these two languages. Python or Go. Okay, Python or Go. You have to learn just one language. Okay, and if you want to learn scripting, then you can go for either Python scripting or you can go for traditional Bash scripting. So once again, if you know any one scripting language, so that is more than sufficient to get into DevOps. Okay, then next, if I talk about how you can get started with all these things that I just spoke about in the previous slides. So I have already created one Linux playlist which is going to give you enough knowledge to get started with your DevOps journey. So you can check all my videos in that playlist, Linux playlist. Apart from that, I'm also working on AWS playlist, and there are already I think 10-12 videos which are already there. So apart from Linux, you can learn AWS's core concepts on core services from my AWS this playlist as well. Once again, I'm going to put the link of all these different playlists and videos in the description of this video, so you can go and watch that. Okay, or if you want to start from elsewhere, then there are plenty of free online courses that you can start with. In my view, you can learn DevOps free of cost if you know how to search content online. Okay, so this is my personal view, that you do not need to spend much if you want to learn DevOps and learn it well. There are ample free sources available on different platforms, including YouTube, which you can use to leverage and learn DevOps to the core and get a DevOps job. Okay, and that's what I did actually. Okay, I did not spend much, only some I mean, I spent very less, and I was able to still learn it, and I'm getting to DevOps, and now I've switched multiple jobs as well. So it is not that difficult. So you don't need to spend much, but you should know how to search for the right content online. All right. If you need any assistance, please reach out to me. I can help you with all the things. All right. Then you can start with creating your AWS's free tier account first. It's going to so here I'm talking about AWS because I've learned AWS, okay, as my cloud platform initially. I know about Azure and the GCP as well, little bit, but my core or my first cloud platform was AWS. So I'm talking in respect to that only. So you can create a free AWS account that is going to give you a good start to the core services in AWS that you can use free of cost for 1 year. So you get 12 months of free tier account in AWS. So you can use that to learn AWS platform. Then so this is like one of the most important things in DevOps. You have to build projects, okay? So you have to build multiple projects, then break them, okay, break things in your project, then try to fix them. This is going to give you the maximum learning, okay? Then show your work on GitHub. So you can create GitHub repos. So once again, GitHub is a free tool to use, and you can create your public repositories there, and you can put all the projects that you've done there, and you can add it to your resume. It's going to give it a lot of weight, and also you can explain those projects in the interviews as well, okay? If you have done good projects, then you're going to get selected for sure, okay? So yeah, I think so that's what you have to do to get started with your DevOps journey. Also, after you have done all that, then practice lots and lots of DevOps interview questions and answers. There are once again ample sources available. Also, I have a playlist as well where I've shared the real DevOps interview questions and answers already. So once again, I'm going to put the URL of that playlist in the description of this video, so you can go and watch all my videos on DevOps interview questions and answers as well. All right. So yeah, I think that's the DevOps roadmap for this year. So I think if you just do all the things that I mentioned in this video, then you're surely going to get selected as a DevOps engineer. Okay. All right, guys, that's all I wanted to cover. I hope this video was useful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. Please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please subscribe to my channel. All right. I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye for now.